He promised me he'd be there, front row, cheering, just like he used to before everything changed. I kept glancing toward the seats as my class filed onto the stage, each of us wrapped in caps and gowns, the auditorium humming with proud laughter and camera flashes. Somewhere in that crowd, I told myself, my dad was waiting for me. But every time I looked, the seat I'd saved for him, third row, aisle, perfect view, stayed empty. When my name was called, I walked across the stage pretending not to notice. My mom clapped so hard her hands turned red, tears streaming down her cheeks. I smiled for her, but it was hollow. The applause around me felt distant, muffled by that single empty chair. After the ceremony, I lingered outside under the bleachers while families took photos, laughter echoing all around. I checked my phone, no text, no missed call. Just a silence that felt too familiar. I tried to convince myself maybe traffic was bad, maybe he was late. But deep down, I already knew. My dad had chosen Alyssa. Again, later that night, scrolling through my stepmom Vanessa's public photo album confirmed it. There they were, Dad, Vanessa, and Alyssa, all dressed up for her big night. Alyssa in a glittering costume, holding flowers the size of her head, Dad's arm proudly around her shoulders. The caption read, "So proud of our star dancer. Family means everything. Family means everything." I stared at those words until my vision blurred. My hands were shaking. It wasn't just that he'd missed my graduation. It was the message behind it, that my achievements, my moments, didn't matter as much as hers. He didn't even bother pretending anymore. Mom found me sitting at the kitchen table long after midnight, my diploma still in its folder. She tried to smile, but the sadness in her eyes told me she knew too. "You did amazing today, Maddie," she said softly. I nodded, unable to speak. I didn't want her pity. I wanted his presence. When my phone finally buzzed, my heart leapt. It was from Dad. "Hey kiddo, sorry I missed it. Alyssa's recital ran long. You know how it is. Proud of you though." That was it. No call, no photo request, not even a question about how it went. I could almost hear his easy tone, that casual way he brushed things off. Something inside me cracked then, not a loud, dramatic break, but a quiet one, like a hairline fracture that would never heal quite right. It wasn't the first time he'd disappointed me, but this time was different. This time it felt final. I closed my phone, turned off the lights, and sat there in the dark, replaying every time he'd chosen her over me. Birthdays, recitals, weekends that were supposed to be ours. I realized he hadn't just missed my graduation. He'd missed me. And for the first time, I promised myself I wouldn't chase after him anymore. If he couldn't see my worth, I'd make sure one day he regretted it. When my dad married Vanessa, everything in my life started to feel smaller, like I'd been pushed to the corner of my own home. Before her, it was just the two of us, Friday night pizza, old movies, and him cheering at my school events. After her, it was all about Vanessa's daughter, Alyssa. She was perfect in his eyes from the very beginning. Pretty, polite when she wanted to be, and always the center of attention. Vanessa made sure it stayed that way. She talked like everything in the world revolved around Alyssa. Her dancing, her clothes, her grades, her future. My dad just nodded along, smiling proudly at every little thing she did. If Alyssa sneezed, it was a delicate thing. If I tried to talk about my science project, he'd say, "Not now, Maddie. Alyssa's had a long day." I remember one weekend that summed everything up. I had a school play where I was finally given the lead role. I'd practiced for weeks, and I begged Dad to come. But that morning, Vanessa told him Alyssa needed new shoes for her recital. They spent the whole day shopping while Mom sat alone in the school auditorium, clapping for me in a nearly empty crowd. Afterward, when I told Dad what he'd missed, he only sighed. You know how sensitive Alyssa is. She needed me. That was his excuse for everything. Over time, I stopped asking. I'd listen to them plan vacations that didn't include me, dinners that were just for the three of us, as if I was some distant relative. Vanessa never hid her dislike for me either. She smiled at me when Dad was around, but the moment he left the room, her voice turned sharp. "Don't expect special treatment, Madison," she'd say. "Your father already does enough for you." But he didn't. He was always too busy proving to Vanessa that he could be the perfect stepdad. I could feel it, the way his hugs became quick and distracted, how his eyes would slide right past me to look at Alyssa instead. I started to fade out of his life quietly, like a photo left in the sun too long. Alyssa loved it. She liked reminding me how close she and my dad were. "He understands me better," she once told me, flipping her hair with that smug smile. I didn't respond. I learned that silence hurt her more than words ever could. Still, her voice echoed in my head every time Dad chose her side. I thought maybe my graduation would change something. Maybe he'd finally see me again. I pictured him proud, telling me he was sorry for all the times he missed out. But that day never came. His absence at my graduation wasn't just one more disappointment. It was the proof I'd been ignoring for years. That night, as I looked at my diploma, I realized something simple. I wasn't part of his new family. I was just a shadow he left behind when he stepped into someone else's picture-perfect world. It hurt, but it also woke me up. I decided that I'd stop trying to compete with Alyssa. I'd stop waiting for him to notice me. If I was invisible to him, fine. One day, he'd see what he'd lost, not because I begged for it, but because I'd built a life so strong that he couldn't ignore it anymore. The ride home after graduation felt endless. My mom tried to fill the silence with small talk, asking about my friends, the food at the ceremony, even joking about the principal's long speech. But I couldn't bring myself to answer much. The car was warm, but everything inside me felt cold. I stared out the window, watching the streetlights blur past, wondering why it hurt so much when I already knew what to expect from my dad. Mom reached over and squeezed my hand. "He missed out, Maddie," she said softly. I nodded, pretending I was fine. She knew better. My chest felt heavy, like all the pride I should have felt had been replaced by disappointment. It wasn't just that he hadn't shown up. It was how normal it had started to feel. When we got home, I changed out of my gown and sat on my bed, scrolling through my phone even though I didn't really want to see anything. My screen was empty of messages. The clock hit 9, then 10. Finally, around 11, my phone lit up. "Dad." His text came first. "Sorry, kiddo." Alyssa's recital ran long. "You know how it is. Proud of you, though." Then, a minute later, he called. I answered, hoping maybe he'd sound like he meant it. But his voice was easy, casual, like he was talking about the weather. "Hey, Maddie. Big day, huh?" I wanted to be there, but Alyssa's recital, it was one night only. "You'll have plenty more graduations." I didn't say anything at first. I just listened, waiting for something real. Some sign that he regretted it. But there was nothing. Just that same calm tone that made it sound like my disappointment was no big deal. When I finally spoke, my voice came out smaller than I wanted. "It was my only high school graduation, Dad." He paused for a second, then sighed. "Don't make this a big thing, okay? We'll celebrate next weekend." Next weekend. Always next weekend. I hung up soon after, saying I was tired. But I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was invisible in my own father's life. Mom peeked in before she went to bed, asking if I needed anything. I told her I was fine. I wasn't. I just didn't want her to see me cry. I thought about everything I had done to make him proud. The grades, the awards, the late nights studying. None of it mattered. It never would. Not as long as he had Alyssa to brag about. He'd already decided who was worth showing up for. That night, something shifted inside me. I realized I couldn't keep waiting for him to care. I couldn't keep hoping that one day he'd look at me the way he looked at her. I had to stop trying to earn a place in his world. I decided that from that moment on, I would stop chasing people who made me feel like an option. If my dad wanted to treat me like a shadow, I'd disappear completely from his light. One day, he'd realize that the daughter he ignored had built a life so bright that his excuses would sound as small as they always were. I didn't want revenge out of anger. I wanted it out of self-respect. And that was the first night I started to mean it. A few weeks passed before I had to see my dad again. I'd left some of my things at his house, books, a few clothes, and an old camera. Mom offered to go with me, but I told her I could handle it. I wanted to act like his absence hadn't bothered me. Deep down, I was nervous. I wasn't sure how to face him after everything that happened. When I pulled up in front of the house, it looked exactly the same. Clean yard, flowers trimmed perfectly, curtains drawn just right. Vanessa liked everything to look perfect, even when nothing underneath really was. As soon as I stepped inside, I could hear her voice from the living room. She was laughing with two of her friends, her tone full of pride. "Oh, Alyssa was amazing at her recital," she said loudly. "She brings us together. You should have seen the crowd, standing ovation and all. We were so proud." Her words hit me before I even saw her. I stood quietly at the hallway entrance, clutching my car keys. Alyssa sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, clearly enjoying the attention. My dad sat beside Vanessa, nodding like her every word was gospel. When they finally noticed me, Vanessa smiled like I was an unexpected guest. "Oh, Madison, we didn't hear you come in." I forced a polite smile. "I just came to grab a few things." Her friends looked me over briefly before turning back to Vanessa, clearly not interested. My dad gave a half-hearted, "Hey, kiddo," and went back to his coffee. I waited for him to ask how I'd been, maybe to mention my graduation, but he didn't. So I said it myself. "Graduation went well," I said, my voice even. "You would have liked it." Vanessa let out a short laugh, as if I'd told a joke. "Oh, honey, that's just high school," she said lightly. "Alyssa's dance is her passion. You'll have more graduations ahead." Her words felt like tiny needles under my skin. Alyssa looked up, a faint smirk on her face. "Well," she said, crossing her arms, "at least Dad made the right choice that day." I froze. My dad didn't say a word. He didn't tell her to stop, didn't defend me, didn't even look embarrassed. He just sat there, pretending the comment wasn't cruel. I turned toward him, hoping for something, an apology, maybe a sign that he realized how much this hurt. But his eyes were on the TV. That was the moment something inside me hardened. I knew then that the person I wanted to make proud wasn't capable of seeing me. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just picked up my bag and said quietly, "Good to know where I stand." Vanessa gave a fake laugh and said something about dinner plans, but I barely heard her. My pulse was loud in my ears as I walked out the door. The sun was bright, but I felt cold. By the time I reached my car, my hands were trembling, not from sadness, but from a strange, sharp clarity. I realized that silence could be stronger than shouting. I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't explain, and I wouldn't forgive. As I drove away, I made myself one promise. They would remember the day they made me feel small. Not because I'd fight them with anger, but because I'd rise so high that they'd have to look up to see me again. That was the day my quiet revenge began. After that visit, I decided to stop wasting time trying to fix something that was already broken. I threw myself into my studies, keeping my head down and planning my escape. College became my goal, the one place where I could finally build a life without feeling like a guest in it. I spent late nights filling out applications, double-checking essays, and researching scholarships. I knew I couldn't count on my dad for help, so I didn't even bother asking. When acceptance letters started arriving, one stood out, a top university with a full scholarship. It felt unreal holding that letter in my hands. My mom hugged me so tight I could barely breathe, tears in her eyes. "You did this all by yourself," she said. And she was right. Every grade, every sleepless night, it all came from me, not from anyone's money or name. I told my dad the news out of respect, not hope. His response was short. "That's great, kiddo. Vanessa's handling our finances right now, so I can't really contribute. But I'm proud of you. It didn't hurt the way it used to." I had expected nothing, and that made it easier. Before college started, I took on 2 part-time jobs, one at a coffee shop and another shelving books at the library. It wasn't easy balancing work and classes, but I liked knowing that everything I had was mine. I didn't owe anyone explanations or gratitude. While other students went home to big dinners and supportive families, I spent weekends in the library or on late-night shifts. The exhaustion was worth it because it kept me moving forward. In my second year, I stopped checking my phone for his messages. The silence that used to bother me became peaceful. I didn't want his attention anymore. I wanted progress. I joined a few student organizations, built friendships that felt real, and found professors who believed in me. Each small victory became another layer of armor, protecting me from the past. Then one afternoon, during a study break, I overheard two girls talking about an audition list for a well-known dance program. One of them mentioned the name Alyssa Blake. My stomach tightened. I hadn't heard about her in months. Later that night, I looked it up out of curiosity and found what I expected. Alyssa hadn't made it. There were no smiling family posts this time. No pictures of flowers or proud captions. From what little I heard later through relatives, Vanessa was furious. She blamed the judges, the school, the stress, everything except her daughter's lack of talent. My dad stayed quiet, probably caught between his guilt and his loyalty to her. I didn't feel happy about their struggles, but I did feel calm. The balance was finally shifting. While they were busy making excuses, I was building a future. I realized I didn't need revenge in the form of arguments or anger. My success would be enough. By the time I graduated college, I had savings, strong grades, and a new sense of confidence. I had created a version of myself that didn't depend on anyone's approval. The pain they caused had turned into quiet motivation. I didn't hate them anymore. I simply didn't care. That was my freedom, and it was worth every lonely night I had endured. For years passed faster than I expected. College life had changed me completely. I wasn't the same quiet girl who once waited for her father's attention. I had built my own world, one made of hard work, focus, and small victories that nobody could take from me. My mom was there every step of the way, always reminding me how far I'd come. She never complained about money or time, even when I knew she was tired. Everything I did was as much for her as it was for myself. When graduation day came, it felt different from high school. This time, there was no empty seat, no disappointment waiting to happen. My mom sat in the front row, waving with tears streaming down her face as my name was called. Hearing my professors talk about my grades and projects, seeing the respect in their eyes, it all felt unreal. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. After the ceremony, my phone buzzed. I already knew who it was. The message from my dad said, "Proud of you, kiddo. Sorry we couldn't make it. Alyssa's been going through a lot. Hope you understand." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then locked it without replying. I didn't need to explain my silence. The message spoke for itself. In those 4 years, I had focused on more than just my classes. I'd worked as an intern at a consulting firm, starting at the bottom, copying files, answering phones, making coffee. But I learned fast. By my senior year, I was managing small projects, trusted with responsibilities that most interns never got. My effort didn't go unnoticed. A week before graduation, they offered me a full-time position in their Chicago office with a salary that made my mom cry with pride. Moving to Chicago felt like closing one door and opening another. I found an apartment downtown, small but bright, with a view of the city lights. Every morning, I walked to work with a sense of purpose I had never felt before. My team respected me. My boss called me reliable. Those words meant more than any apology my dad could ever give. Around that time, I started hearing whispers through family friends about Vanessa's business. The boutique she had opened a few years back wasn't doing well. Customers were leaving, rent was high, and her reputation wasn't as spotless as she liked to pretend. I didn't feel happy about it, but I couldn't help noticing how life seemed to balance things on its own. Alyssa, who once had everything handed to her, was struggling too. Her dance career hadn't gone anywhere, and she was living back home, unsure what to do next. I didn't reach out. I didn't need to. The universe had already done enough. I spent my evenings sitting by the window, sipping coffee, looking at the city I now called mine. I thought about the girl who once cried over an empty seat at graduation. She'd grown stronger, sharper, and calmer. I no longer wanted to prove anything to my dad or make him regret his choices. My life itself was proof enough. The best part of success wasn't showing it off. It was knowing I'd earned it completely on my own. It had been months since I'd heard anything from my father or Vanessa. Life in Chicago kept me busy, and I rarely thought about them anymore. My days were filled with work meetings, projects, and dinners with coworkers who had slowly become my friends. I was finally in a place where peace didn't feel forced. Then one afternoon, while I was finishing a report at my desk, my phone rang. The number looked familiar, but I couldn't place it right away. When I answered, I heard her voice. "Madison, sweetheart. How are you?" It was Vanessa, her tone overly sweet, like she was trying too hard. I leaned back in my chair, already guessing where the conversation was heading. "Your dad's been under so much stress lately," she began. "The market's been rough, and the house, well, things aren't easy right now. You know how it is." I didn't reply, just listened. She continued, "Alyssa's college bills are piling up, and we're trying to stay on top of everything. Your dad didn't want me to call, but I told him you'd understand. You've always been so responsible." There it was, the real reason for the call. She wanted money or sympathy, maybe both. I stayed quiet, letting her fill the silence with nervous chatter. After a few seconds, she added softly, "We might lose the house if we don't figure something out soon." I didn't say what I was thinking, that the house she was talking about had never felt like mine. Instead, I said calmly, "I'm sorry to hear that," keeping my voice even. Before she could say anything else, I told her I had a meeting and hung up. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time, it was my dad. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity won. "Hey, kiddo," he said, trying to sound casual, the same tone he always used when he wanted something. "I know Vanessa called earlier. Things have been rough, but we'll get through it. We just have to stick together as a family." I couldn't help but laugh quietly. "Family?" I asked. "You mean the kind that skips graduations and birthdays?" He stayed silent for a moment. "Maddie, don't start," he said finally. "I know I've made mistakes, but this isn't about that. This is about helping each other. We've all had hard times." I took a slow breath, remembering the years I had struggled without his help. College tuition, rent, long nights working 2 jobs. I had survived alone, and now he was reaching out as if we'd always been close. "Did you stay together when you missed my graduation?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched long enough that I could almost hear him breathing on the other end. I imagined him sitting there, realizing how hollow his words sounded now. Finally, he said, "That was a long time ago, Maddie." "Not long enough to forget," I said, my voice steady. "I hope things work out for you, Dad." Then I ended the call. I stared at my phone for a long time afterward. There was no anger left, only a deep, calm understanding. The people who had once made me feel invisible were now reaching out because they needed me. But I wasn't that desperate girl anymore. I had learned that distance can protect you more than love ever could. And for the first time, cutting the line didn't hurt. It felt right. I hadn't planned to go home that Christmas. Work was busy, and Chicago felt more like home than the town I grew up in. But when my mom asked me to visit for a few days, I agreed. I hadn't seen my dad in years, not since that call where I finally stopped pretending things could ever be normal. I told myself I'd only stay a night or 2, just long enough to see my mom and drop off gifts. The town looked smaller than I remembered, quieter too. Snow covered the front lawns, and the lights on my dad's house flickered weakly. It didn't look like the picture-perfect home Vanessa always bragged about. When I parked out front, I almost turned back. But curiosity kept me there. My dad opened the door before I knocked. For a second, I almost didn't recognize him. His hair had gone gray, and there were deep lines around his eyes. He looked tired, like someone carrying too many regrets. "Madison," he said, forcing a smile. "Didn't think you'd actually come." Inside, the house felt cold, not just from the weather, but from something heavier. The decorations were sparse, nothing like the bright, overdone Christmases Vanessa used to post about. She sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, looking irritated more than welcoming. Alyssa was beside her, quiet, her expression hard to read. I could sense the tension right away. My dad tried to start small talk, asking about Chicago, my job, things he should have known years ago. I answered politely, keeping it brief. Then Vanessa finally looked up, her tone fake sweet as always. "You've done so well for yourself, Madison," she said. "Your father and I were just talking about how proud we are. You've got a good job now, right?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, things are going well." She exchanged a quick glance with my dad, then continued. "We've had a tough year. The business hasn't been doing great, and with Alyssa taking a break from school, things have been complicated. We were wondering if maybe you could help us find some stability. You're so capable." It wasn't a direct request, but the meaning was obvious. I looked at her, then at Alyssa, who wouldn't even meet my eyes. My dad shifted uncomfortably, not saying a word. The man who once ignored my needs now sat silent while his wife hinted for help. I smiled politely, the same way they had done to me all those years ago. "You know," I said lightly, "that's just adulthood. You'll have more chances." The words hung in the air for a moment. My dad looked at me sharply, realizing exactly what I meant. It was what he'd said to me after missing my high school graduation. Back then, it broke me. Now, saying it back felt like closing a door that had been left open too long. Vanessa's fake smile faltered. Alyssa crossed her arms, muttering something under her breath. I stood up, straightened my coat, and said, "I should get going. Mom's waiting." My dad followed me to the door, his voice low. "Madison, I know I failed you." I stopped but didn't turn around. "You didn't just fail me, Dad. You chose to." The winter air hit my face as I stepped outside, crisp and clean. For the first time, I felt no anger, no sadness, just freedom. I realized I had finally walked away, not as the forgotten daughter, but as someone who had outgrown their chaos completely. It had been a few months since that awkward holiday visit when I heard the news. My dad's house had been foreclosed. A neighbor told my mom that Vanessa packed up her things and left with Alyssa soon after the bank notice arrived. The picture-perfect life they'd tried so hard to show the world had finally fallen apart. When I found out, I didn't feel angry or happy, just distant. It was strange to think about how much time I'd once spent aching for their approval. Now, hearing that everything they'd built on appearances was gone, it barely stirred anything inside me. I had built my peace somewhere else, and nothing about their downfall could take that away. Weeks passed before I heard directly from him. It was a quiet Sunday morning when my phone rang. His name flashed on the screen, and for a long moment, I just stared at it. Part of me wanted to ignore the call, but something deeper, curiosity, maybe closure, made me answer. His voice was shaky. "Maddie, it's me." I said nothing. The silence stretched between us, filled with years of things that had never been said. Finally, he took a breath and continued. "I don't even know where to start. Everything's gone. The house, Vanessa, even Alyssa won't talk to me. His voice broke. I wish I'd been there that day. At your graduation. Maybe things would have been different." Hearing him cry felt unreal. This was the man who once told me to stop making things a big deal, who brushed off every hurt like it was nothing. Now he sounded small, lost. I didn't interrupt. I wanted to let him speak, to hear the truth without rescuing him from it. He kept talking, repeating how sorry he was, how he'd made mistakes, how he'd thought he was doing the right thing. I could tell he wanted forgiveness, but he wasn't asking for it directly. He just wanted to know if there was still a chance to fix what he'd broken. When he finally stopped talking, the silence came again, only this time it felt heavier. I thought back to all those years I'd spent hoping he would say those words, imagining how it might feel if he ever apologized. But now that it was happening, there was no satisfaction in it. The apology came too late to matter. I took a deep breath. My voice came out calm, steady. "You missed one ceremony, Dad," I said quietly. "But it cost you a lifetime of moments." He didn't respond right away. I could hear him breathing, maybe crying again. For a second, I almost felt sorry for him, but only for the man he could have been, not the one he was. "I have to go," I said softly. "Take care of yourself." And then I hung up. Afterward, I sat on my couch for a long while, staring out at the city skyline. I didn't feel triumphant or cruel, just free. There was no revenge in my heart, only acceptance. The life he had chosen over me had fallen apart, not because I wanted it to, but because it was never real to begin with. For the first time, I realized the distance between us wasn't a punishment. It was peace. And I wasn't his forgotten daughter anymore. I was just Madison, whole, steady, and finally done waiting for him to see me. Years passed quietly, and life moved forward in ways I once couldn't imagine. Chicago had become my home, not just a place to live. I had a job I loved, a small circle of good friends, and an apartment that reflected everything I had worked for. Mornings were calm, coffee by the window, the sound of traffic below, and sunlight spilling across the floor. It wasn't a grand life, but it was mine, and that was enough. My mom visited often, bringing homemade food and stories from back home. Every time she came, she looked around my apartment with a kind of awe, as if she still couldn't believe how far things had come. "You built all of this on your own," she'd say proudly. I'd smile and remind her that she'd been there for every step that mattered. We'd spend evenings cooking together or taking walks along the river, enjoying the peace that had once felt impossible. I hadn't spoken to my dad in years. He tried reaching out a few times through letters, handwritten in messy script that looked more fragile each time. I never opened them. I kept them in a drawer, not out of hope, but because I didn't want to waste energy throwing them away. Reading them wouldn't change anything. The truth had already been said long ago, and there was nothing left to explain. Sometimes I'd wonder what he was doing, if he still lived in that old town, if he thought about me when the house felt too quiet. But those thoughts faded as quickly as they came. I had stopped carrying the weight of his choices. The forgiveness I eventually found wasn't for him. It was for me. Letting go didn't mean letting him back in. It meant refusing to let the past control me anymore. At work, I earned a promotion that came with a bigger office and a small team of my own. I led with fairness, the kind I never saw growing up. My coworkers respected me for being calm under pressure, and every project I completed reminded me that strength didn't have to come from anger. Success had become my quiet response to every moment I was once overlooked. On weekends, I liked visiting little bookstores and coffee shops, places filled with strangers who didn't know my story. It felt peaceful to live without explaining myself, to exist without needing validation. The world outside my window was wide, and for the first time, I wasn't standing in anyone's shadow. One evening, while cleaning, I came across the drawer with my dad's letters. I held one for a moment, tracing my name on the envelope. Then I set it back down and closed the drawer. I didn't feel the urge to read it, and I didn't feel angry either. I had moved so far beyond that pain that it barely touched me anymore. I realized then that real revenge doesn't come from getting even or proving someone wrong. It comes from becoming whole when they expected you to stay broken. My silence spoke louder than any words I could have said. My peace, my success, and my self-worth were enough. I didn't need him to see what I had become. The life I built was my answer, and it was stronger than any apology he could have offered.